Hey, look, is that Dad?
Either that or Batman's really let himself go.
Enough said.
The Simpsons is the longest-running animated show in history and has its fair share of ups and downs. That being said, there is a mighty legacy behind this popular show which loves to include pop culture references. The characters from the Marvel comics have been casually and not so casually brought up in the show a few times now. From blink and you'll miss it moments to hulking set pieces, The Simpsons has shown quite a lot of love for the Marvel comics and movies.
We shall continue this conversation in the pie cave.
The Simpsons has a huge cast of characters across all of its seasons, with some of them only showing up for one episode. That's the case for Celeste, a girl in Lisa's class at Springfield Elementary. The episode sees Lisa trying to convince the makers of the Malibu Stacy dolls to try and create something more positive for girls. Upon hearing what some of the dolls have to say on the school grounds, Lisa challenges the girls when she hears a doll say,
"Let's buy makeup so the boys will like us."
Celeste counters Lisa, informing her that something is wrong with hers. When she tugs at the string, we actually hear the voice of Spider-Man.
My Spidey sense is tingling. Anybody call for a web slinger?
Not only is this a cool shout-out to the web slinger, but it's a parody of a real-world event. Back in the day, a group would swap the vocal boxes of some talking G.I. Joes and Barbie dolls. They did this to illustrate the sexism in toys targeted towards children. Did you ever get a doll with the wrong vocal box? Let us know. We'll be talking about the events from the episode I Am Furious Yellow a few times in this video, as it's one of the most marvelous episodes out there. But to start off, we have to show some love to the creator himself, Stan Lee. Bart decides to show comic book guy his own work, only to be told it's lame and derivative, which honestly, what a critic this guy is, right? A voice calls out that he'll be the judge of that, and it's none other than Stan Lee himself, one of the key writers at Marvel. Stan opts to immediately cover a Superman comic with that of a copy of X-Men he was carrying. After giving Bart a sort of pep talk about trying, he corners Database, who is looking for a Batman figure for his Batmobile toy. Stan says Database doesn't need a Batman toy, and proceeds to ram a statue of the Thing into the vehicle. He insists he made the toy better, despite clearly breaking it, to which comic book guy comments that Stan's mind isn't in mint condition anymore. But of course, being a comic book company, there are more connections to Marvel when it comes to comic book guy. This particularly blasphemous incident occurs in the episode titled Homer vs. Dignity. That was the one where Homer ends up working as Mr. Burns' personal jester after he asks for a raise. Mr. Burns tells Homer to pull a prank on comic book guy and gives him a suitcase. Inside said suitcase was $20,000 in cash. Seriously, Homer, run. Instead of running and keeping the money for himself, which he clearly needs, he goes into the shop and asks to buy a mint condition copy of Spider-Man #1. After inputting the security code of 007, comic book guy removes the issue from its heavily protected casing. Homer then proceeds to eat the comic, which causes comic book guy to freak out.
No! What are you doing? Good, fair, poor!
We don't blame him. Spider-Man's first appearance in Amazing Fantasy #15 sold at auction in 2011 for $1.1 million, while the record sale of a Spider-Man #1 was $135,000. In the early days of The Simpsons, Halloween specials were straight up spooky and perfect for the season. As time went on, the specials deviated to become more in line with parody and pop culture as opposed to frightening. Such is the case for the Treehouse of Horror 14, specifically in the third segment titled Stop the World, I Wants to Goof Off. In this one, Bart and Milhouse get a stopwatch that allows them to stop time. This, of course, leads them to pull a ton of pranks on the town, much to their delight. After a whole bunch of shenanigans, Lisa finds a second button on the watch which messes with reality. One of the outcomes of this button press is that the Simpsons become the Fantastic Four. Bart turns into Mr. Fantastic, while Homer is the Thing, Marge is the Human Torch, and Maggie ends up being Susan Storm, aka the Invisible Woman. It's too bad they didn't use the Fantastic Four premise longer, but it's still a fun reference for fans of the superhero team. For this particular gift, we have to go back to My Big Fat Geek Wedding from season 15. That's the one where Skinner ends up getting cold feet before tying the knot with Krabappel, which causes her to call the whole thing off. This episode actually has two awesome Marvel moments in it. One of the gifts the couple got as a wedding gift was an Incredible Hulk melon baller, courtesy of Comic Book Guy. After calling the wedding off, Edna Krabappel ends up being courted by Comic Book Guy himself, who brings her on a date to a convention. At said convention, we can see people dressed up as various Marvel characters. Keep your eyes peeled for the likes of Spider-Man, Captain America, Cyclops, and Storm from the X-Men. Edna eventually decides to not marry Skinner or Comic Book Guy, who proposed to her after seeing Simpsons creator Matt Groening at the convention. At the convention, Groening is credited as the Futurama creator. What's been your go-to costume at conventions? The Simpsons is known for creating new icons within its own canon. Hits such as Radioactive Man have been a constant mainstay, but Homer decides one day to become an actual superhero. In typical Homer fashion, the heroic name he chooses for his crime-fighting alter ego is dubbed Pieman. And while that may not have any connection to any superhero, no matter the publication, the episode did find a few ways to tie Pieman's story to Sam Raimi's first Spider-Man film. Like any good superhero, Pieman needs a costume. Amazingly, Homer knows how to sew and decides to upgrade his amateur costume into something more professional. While making his new costume, the montage sequence mimics Tobey Maguire's Peter Parker from Raimi's movie. The scene features a lot of close-up shots of the costume being made with plenty of transitions and wipes. But that's just the first of two Spider-Man references. Homer rescues Marge at the last second before being trampled by a mob. The two share a kiss in that alley that's a straight-up homage to Spidey and MJ's upside-down kiss. In the episode The Haw Haw's Couple, Bart's entire class gets invited to Nelson's birthday party. But Nelson, being the school bully, hasn't earned much in the way of friends. This makes it easy for Bart and Martin to convince the whole class not to attend the party. Of course, Marge finds out about the party bash and forces Bart to attend. This means that Bart is the only person at the party. Nelson is convinced the lack of attendees is due to the traffic on Highway 88. After punching out his inflatable, some guests do appear. Instead of hiring Krusty the Clown to be the entertainment of the party, Nelson's mom hired actors dressed up as Spider-Man and his nemesis, Doc Ock. Spider-Man, voiced by Hank Azaria, uses silly string from his fanny pack to double as webbing. Upon seeing the lack of guests, Spider-Man opts to leave, which causes Nelson to freak out. He really seems to think the actor is the real Spider-Man. The duo that is Bart and Nelson, who are now friends, then decide to beat up Doc Ock with his own arms after that. This instance ties indirectly to our following entry thanks to the launch of the Angry Dad movie. Based off a series of comics Bart made back in the day, Season 22 saw the comic get turned into a feature film, which gets bestowed tons of praise and awards, including an Oscar nomination. While awaiting for the Oscars to start, Homer and Marge learn that an opening skit by Ben Stiller and Jack Black is apparently running far too long. This gives Homer some time to get to the ceremony. The skit Stiller and Black were performing was a bizarro interpretation of the Avengers. Stiller was dressed up as Iron Man while Jack Black got to portray the Hulk. Both were suspended high in the air with ropes and, ironically, fighting with lightsabers. Disney had yet to purchase Lucasfilms. Perhaps this skit inspired them to add Star Wars to their IPs, which includes Marvel. There definitely seems to be something there. Thankfully, the real Avengers movies are way more exciting than Stiller and Black's bit, even if it involved Marvel heroes wielding lightsabers.
Turn it off, for God's sake, turn it off!
These last two entries are awesome, and probably the best two featured on this list. For this one, we have to go back to the episode titled I Am Furious Yellow. That's the one where Stan Lee cameos as himself. Well, that wasn't the only connection to Marvel in that episode. Homer's plotline involved him giving up anger completely, which doesn't help Bart out. Bart decided to work on comic books and eventually came up with the hyper-popular series titled Angry Dad. As you can imagine, the series is based off the rage of Homer. But when Homer decides to give up anger, Bart starts to run out of ideas and has to force Homer to get angry. Bart stages a trap, which he learns he doesn't need anymore, and it all culminates with Homer being dropped into a pool of green paint. Infuriated, Homer becomes the ingestible Bulk, parodying the Incredible Hulk.
Thank God his pants stayed on.
Stan Lee states that Homer can't be the Hulk because he's in fact the Hulk and tries to transform. For all the love the MCU has, The Simpsons just can't seem to stay away from Sam Raimi's Spider-Man movies. And who can blame him? The first two movies are some of the best superhero flicks ever made, even to this day. In Mona Lisa, Lisa ends up taking Moe's notes and transforming them into poetry. She submits the poetry to none other than J. Jonah Jameson, Peter Parker's deranged yet hysterical boss at the Daily Bugle. What's even more amazing is that this version of Jameson is played by J.K. Simmons, just like in the Raimi movies and the post-credit scene of Spider-Man Far From Home. While this Jameson may not work at the Bugle, he does have the same mannerisms and reactions that the cinematic version had. He speaks quickly, yells, tells people they're fired, and so on. At the end of the episode, he actually yells that he needs pictures of Spider-Man, despite working at a poetry publication. He then asks for poems about Spider-Man instead.
And I want to finish before you start. And before you finish, give me some coffee. And the poem should have the following rhyme scheme. A-B-B-A-A-B-B-A-C-D-E-C-D-E. What are you waiting for? Chinese New Year?
That sums up the awesome Marvel connections we can find in The Simpsons. What's your favorite moment the show captured from the superhero franchise? Are you still an avid fan of The Simpsons, or has the show run its course? Are you rewatching it on Disney+? Let us know in the comments below. And be sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more videos like this in your playlist every day. Thanks for watching.